Emily had never imagined that her life could change with just one phone call. She was just a young woman, working as a waitress in a small cafe, trying to pay rent 1 coin at a time. But that afternoon, when she saw an unfamiliar number flashing on her screen, Emily had no idea that just minutes later, she would learn a shocking secret. She was the sole heir to a billion-dollar empire, the long-lost daughter of a powerful CEO respected by the world. The man, Alexander Cole, had believed his daughter died at birth, until he received an unexpected DNA test result from a stranger. Emily, who had grown up in loneliness and poverty, had no idea that she had been switched at birth. Her biological parents had been searching for her day and night, and Alexander, the cold and ruthless businessman, never imagined that his heart could melt from just one glance, one smile. From the very daughter he thought he'd lost forever. Are you ready to embark on a journey filled with tears, life-changing secrets, and moments of reunion that will melt your heart? This is the story of Emily, a girl from a poor cafe worker to an unexpected heir, and of Alexander, the father who lived a life of regret, never knowing that hope was still waiting for him. Emily lived in a small town where everyone knew each other's names, where each day began with the church bells ringing and ended with the hum of cicadas under the shade of ancient trees. The 22-year-old worked in a modest cafe on the corner of the main street, where the wooden chairs had worn edges from years of use, and the air was always filled with the warm scent of freshly brewed coffee and pastries. Emily had soft blonde hair, a simple yet graceful face, but most striking were her clear blue eyes, which gleamed with an unspoken longing. People who met Emily for the first time often smiled and said she looked like a lost rich girl, but Emily just shook her head. She never thought of herself as special. Each day, Emily hurried to clean the tables, brew drinks, and greet customers with a smile. But when night fell and she returned to the small room above the cafe, she would sit alone by the window, gazing up at the starry sky, wondering, is this all my life will ever be? Deep inside, she felt a vague emptiness, as though a part of her past had been severed, unknown to her. Her dreams of a better life never faded, but they were never strong enough to turn into action. She often thought she was just an ordinary girl in an ordinary town, and the large world outside had nothing to do with her. Little did Emily know that an unexpected door was about to open, a door that would change everything. Since she was a child, Emily had lived with her grandmother, a kind woman with white hair and a gentle voice like the breeze. Every evening, her grandmother would sit by her bed and tell stories, from fairy tales to old tales from the town. But there was one story her grandmother never shared, the story of her father. Emily knew that her mother had died when she gave birth to her, a tragedy that left the whole family in deep sorrow. Her grandmother always said Emily was the last gift her mother left behind, the only miracle that kept her going. But when Emily asked about her father, her grandmother would fall silent, her eyes welling with tears, then quickly change the subject. There were nights when Emily would toss and turn, unable to sleep, staring at the dark ceiling, wondering, who is my father? Is he still alive? Does he ever think of me? But as she grew older, she began to feel that maybe it was best not to know. Their lives were simple and peaceful enough. Perhaps knowing the truth would only bring pain. Yet, deep in her heart, Emily still longed to know where she came from, who she was, and if anyone out there was thinking of her. It was a gray, rainy day when Emily was wiping down the counter and saw a thick envelope mixed in with the junk mail. The sender was a law office from New York, a name she had never heard before. The letter said they wanted to meet her to discuss an important matter related to her personal rights. Emily froze, her heart racing. She had never been involved in anything big, and no one outside of her town had ever mentioned her name. Her hands trembled as she handed the letter to her grandmother, who frowned, shook her head, and suggested it might just be a mistake or a scam. But Emily's curiosity had already been awakened. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She lay awake, imagining 1,000 wild scenarios. Maybe it was about money, property, or even some family secret. She knew she had nothing to lose, but she didn't believe she could be important enough for someone from New York to contact her. Finally, in a moment of impulse, Emily made a decision. She would go to the city and find out what was waiting for her. In the days that followed, Emily wrestled with herself. On one hand, she thought the whole thing was ridiculous. Why would an ordinary girl with no wealth or fame be invited to meet a lawyer in New York? But on the other hand, she couldn't shake the voice inside her that said, what if this is a chance to change your life? What if this is the key to answering all the questions you've had all these years? Emily had never left her town, never traveled far on her own. But this time, she felt she couldn't turn back. Her grandmother initially opposed, afraid Emily would be scammed or disappointed. But in the end, she hugged her tightly and said, if Emily needed to find answers, she wouldn't stop her. Emily took the night bus, alone with her old backpack, gazing through the fogged-up window as the familiar houses faded away. Her heart was full of anxiety and excitement, unsure of where she was heading, only knowing that, for the first time in her life, Emily felt like she was stepping out of her cage to search for herself. When Emily set foot in the towering building in the heart of New York, she was completely overwhelmed. This was not her world: the tailored suits, the shiny shoes, the expensive cars. She nervously walked into the law office, feeling like a fish out of water. The polite lawyer greeted her with a smile and invited her to sit down. Then he opened a thick file, his voice steady but serious. Emily, you may not know this, but recently a medical test revealed that your DNA matches. Alexander Carter, CEO of Carter Enterprises. Emily froze, her face pale. Alexander Carter, one of the wealthiest and most famous billionaires in America. The owner of the giant corporation she had only seen on the news. Emily felt like she was hearing a fairy tale. How could this be real? How could a cafe waitress from a small town be connected to someone like him? The lawyer continued slowly, Mr. Carter lost his daughter at birth, but we believe you are that child. Emily's mouth hung open in disbelief. The room seemed to spin around her. She gripped the chair tightly, her breath quickening. How could this be happening? All these years, she had lived believing her father had never shown up, had never wanted to find her. Now, the truth was crashing down. Her father wasn't just an ordinary man, but a famous billionaire. And he had no idea she was alive. Emily's heart shattered, a mixture of anger, confusion, joy, and fear. The lawyer looked her in the eye and said that Alexander had never known, that this discovery had been a coincidence thanks to medical data. Emily didn't know how to feel. Part of her wanted to run away, return to the simple life she knew. But another part urged her forward, to discover the truth, to find the missing piece of her life. Emily sat there, her hands clasped tightly, taking a deep breath. In that moment, she understood that her life would never be the same again. Alexander Carter, a man renowned for his sharp decisions in the business world, could easily make anyone bow before his talent and power. From a young age, he showed an innate leadership ability, building a business empire worth billions. But to those closest to him, Alexander was not an easy man to approach. He could laugh heartily at parties, yet his eyes always revealed a deep loneliness. as if he had never truly found peace. People couldn't understand why someone who had everything, a person who could buy anything in the world, chose to live alone in a grand mansion, without any loved ones around. It had been a long time since anyone had seen him with someone, and no woman had ever appeared by his side. Only in the evenings would he quietly sit alone in his office, surrounded by thick files and meetings that lasted until late at night. They say that Alexander Carter's life was perfect, except for a wound in his heart that would never heal. The pain of losing his only love, the woman he cherished most, remained like a scar deeply etched in his soul. She had passed away during childbirth, giving birth to their first daughter. Since then, Alexander could never love anyone else. That loss, the agony of never getting to see his daughter's face, led him to choose a life of solitude. It seemed his life had taken a different path from that point, where material things no longer mattered. He lived and worked with only one purpose, to never have to remember those lost moments. No matter how wealthy, powerful, or famous Alexander became, one thing no one knew was that he always lived in the shadow of his past. His daughter's room, although many years had passed, was kept exactly as it was on the first day. Every year, on the anniversary of her death, he would leave all his work behind, drive alone to the mansion, and enter his daughter's room, filled with old toys and hand-drawn pictures from when she was very young. The room had no one but him, no laughter, no presence of a child. Yet, Alexander continued this ritual every year. He never told anyone about these memorials. No one knew that on each anniversary, he would sit silently by the small bed, light a candle, place a red rose on the table, and quietly whisper words of love that seemed long forgotten. Despite the passage of time, the pain never faded, as if he was living in the shadow of an irreversible decision, but for him, this was the only way to feel the presence of his daughter. Even if it was just through lost memories. No one knew, no one understood. And perhaps he didn't want anyone to know. Because in the world full of the bright lights of success, he only had one shadow he couldn't escape from, the longing for the daughter he had never met. When the lawyer called and informed Alexander that a girl named Emily might be his biological daughter, he couldn't believe his ears. First, a wave of anger surged, followed by doubt. How could this be possible? Was someone trying to deceive him? Was someone trying to steal his fortune or use his fame to gain attention? No matter what, he couldn't accept something like this. His daughter had been gone for a long time. Lost from his life even before she was born. How could this girl be alive and now appear? With each word from the lawyer, his anger intensified. He could only think one thing: this is a scam. But after a few seconds of silence, another feeling began to creep into him: confusion, fear. How could he go on if this were true? If this girl really was his daughter, if all those years of loneliness, all that loss, could be replaced with a real daughter? The thought made his heart ache, tightening painfully. In the end, he couldn't resist the need to know the truth. Although he didn't believe it, he agreed to meet Emily. After all, this was the first time he had a chance to look back at a part of the lost past. Regardless, this was his only opportunity. Deciding to meet Emily wasn't easy for Alexander. Everything in him resisted. No one could replace the memory of his love, no one could fill the void left by his daughter. But he still went, still decided to meet this girl just to verify. He needed a reason to end everything and return to his quiet life. When he entered the meeting room, Alexander could not hide the coldness in his eyes. He stood there silently, observing the girl in front of him. Emily, though very beautiful, appeared shy and nervous. She didn't know what to do, where to begin. She felt an overwhelming fear that overshadowed her belief. Everything had surpassed her limits. But she knew she had to be strong, no matter what happened. Alexander looked into her eyes, where there was a mix of innocence and skepticism. Was this his daughter? Was this the girl he thought he had lost forever? But he didn't allow his emotions to show. He tried to remain calm. Everything would end when he confirmed the truth, and then, he could return to his peaceful life. The meeting between Emily and Alexander took place in a tense atmosphere, so thick you could feel the weight in every word spoken. Emily sat there, glancing around, her hands trembling, but she couldn't escape the truth in front of her. She wanted to call him Dad, but feared that doing so would make him feel pressured. She didn't know what to say or do. Alexander sat across from her, his face expressionless, showing no emotions. He looked at her, his cold eyes devoid of any affection. It felt as if he was fighting against something he couldn't explain. Was this his daughter? The girl sitting before him, a stranger who seemed nothing like what he had imagined, was she really his daughter? Suddenly, in the light of the room, a beam of light hit the simple silver necklace Emily was wearing around her neck. It was a gift that Alexander had once chosen for his daughter, the only gift he could imagine at that time. He vividly remembered the day he sat in the jewelry store, holding the box, selecting the gift for the daughter he would never meet. In that moment, all the memories came rushing back like a powerful wave, and Alexander couldn't control his emotions. Was his daughter really alive? That necklace, the gift he had chosen for her, was now before his eyes. It felt like a sign, a message from a world he thought had been permanently closed. Alexander's heart tightened. And he began to waver. Could this be true? Emily never imagined that her meeting with Alexander would lead to such a painful journey of self-discovery. After several conversations with him and the lawyer, the pieces of the story began to come together before her eyes. One afternoon, while Emily was searching through the archives of Alexander's family, she stumbled upon old documents related to her mother. A yellowed piece of paper, an unsent letter, and a copy of notes from conversations during her mother's pregnancy. Everything made her heart ache. Her mother was not the one who abandoned the family, as she had been told by others. Her mother was a victim of family pressure, and this truth made her feel as though the whole world had turned its back on her mother. She hadn't just lost someone she loved, she had been forced by society into a path of suffering, living in the shadows and hiding the existence of a child. Her mother's whole life seemed to have been a battle against this truth, concealing it not only out of fear but also out of pride, not wanting anyone to take responsibility for her loss. Emily couldn't believe her mother had to endure all of that. Her mother had loved Alexander deeply, but their separation had been inevitable. She couldn't help but feel a deep pain in her heart. This girl had grown up in a world devoid of her mother's love, but now, the truth behind all the pain forced her to look at everything in a new light. Her world had changed in an instant. She couldn't change the past, but at least she could now understand her mother better, the woman who had done everything to protect her. With a heavy heart, Alexander began to search through the letters his former lover had sent him over the years. For the first time in many years, he decided to delve into the drawers and old file cabinets where he had hidden them long ago. These letters had been intercepted by his family, and he had never known their true content. Each letter could be a piece of the past, a message he should have received. One of the last letters he found was from his former lover, a letter he was sure had been hidden from him. After reading it, he could not remain calm. His lover had written about her longing, about how she had to leave to protect their daughter, and how she had always hoped one day Alexander would understand and forgive her. But the letter had never reached him. Instead of an apology, understanding, and a chance to rebuild, he had received rejection from his family, who had kept him in the dark, as he read those emotional words. Alexander felt a growing pain in his chest. He wondered, if he had received those letters, would his life have been different? Would he have found his daughter long ago, or at least lived in a complete family without enduring the loneliness he had suffered all these years? A sense of guilt surged within him, as if he had missed an opportunity to mend everything, to save his relationship with his lover and his daughter. One evening, in a quiet room in Alexander's mansion, father and daughter sat facing each other, looking at the shattered pieces of the past they had just uncovered. They no longer felt like strangers, no longer like two different people, one rich, successful, and cold, the other a young girl searching for meaning in her world. Both had lived in the shadows of misunderstandings, pressures from family and society, things they could not change. Alexander looked at Emily, his eyes full of regret. He realized that all these years, it had been the pride and arrogance of his family that had kept them apart. They had not allowed him to love his daughter, not allowed him to be a father. Meanwhile, Emily had lived a life without her father's love. She had learned to be strong on her own, without any protection from family. They were both victims of a tragic story, one no one could have foreseen. This separation was not just caused by material distances or social status, but also by wrong decisions, by prohibitions they couldn't change. As time passed, things became even more complicated, and now, all they had left were memories that could never be healed. But despite everything, a part of both of them knew that no matter how many years passed, they were still father and daughter, and nothing could change that. For Emily, the biggest question in her heart wasn't whether Alexander was her father, but how she should live in this new world. She had grown up in a small town with a simple life, nothing but a job at a cafe and dreams of a better future. But now, she stood before a completely different world. A world of luxurious mansions, formal dinners, and a father she had never known. She felt like an outsider in her own life. Each day, when she looked in the mirror, she didn't know who she was looking at. She couldn't help but wonder if she truly belonged to this world, or if she was simply a stranger trying to live in an unfamiliar life. She didn't know what to do with her feelings for her father, when everything was so different from what she had imagined. She didn't know if she could adapt to this glamorous world or if she would always be just a regular girl who didn't know how to fit in. As the days passed, Alexander realized that letting his daughter into his life wasn't easy. He didn't know how to heal the wounds in her heart, wounds he had helped create. He feared that no matter what he did, it was too late. There was no way to make up for the lost years, and he didn't want to force his daughter to accept something she wasn't ready for. Every time he looked into Emily's eyes, his heart ached. He wanted to say he was sorry, but he couldn't find the right words. Gradually, in the quiet moments, the distance between the two of them began to shrink. They ate dinner together, talked about the little things in life, and started sharing memories, even simple ones, but ones that were precious. Stories from the old days, Alexander's childhood memories, and memories Emily had never known. These small moments made them feel closer than ever. When rumors about a secret heir of Alexander Carter began spreading across the media, Emily's life turned completely upside down. At first, she was just an ordinary girl living in a small town, dreaming of a better life. But now, her name was splashed across headlines. And camera flashes followed her relentlessly every time she stepped outside. The attention from the media and the public made Emily feel like she was being pushed into a world that didn't belong to her. She wasn't prepared for this. How could she face the endless questions about her past, about the expectations everyone suddenly placed on her shoulders. People around her looked at her as if she were a symbol, part of a grand story. But Emily was just a 22-year-old girl who had never imagined she'd become the center of such attention. She didn't know how to deal with all those stares, all those expectations. All she wanted was to live a peaceful life, not become a tool for the media to exploit. In a single moment, Emily decided to leave it all behind. The pressure from the media, from those around her, from Alexander's family, it all seemed to back her into a corner with no way out. She felt exhausted, as if everything was slipping through her fingers. She couldn't bear it anymore. The sleepless nights, the questions about her past and her future, the expectations she couldn't meet, all of it left her feeling like she couldn't breathe. With a confused heart, she decided to return to the small town she had left so long ago. It was the only place she felt safe, where everything was simple and peaceful. She didn't need to be the secret heir or part of a wealthy family. She just wanted to be herself, to live the life she wanted. She didn't want to be a tool in the media's hands, didn't want to be surrounded by the stage lights she couldn't control. But no matter how hard she tried to run, she still felt everything chasing her, like a shadow she couldn't escape. Things had gone too far, and Alexander couldn't just stand by and watch his daughter fall into panic without doing anything. He had spent his whole life building an empire, becoming a man everyone admired, but when faced with Emily, he realized that nothing mattered more than family. Nothing was more important than making up for the lost years. For the first time in his life, he couldn't bear it anymore. Work, money, reputation, none of it had meaning if his daughter was running away. Feeling lost in his world, Alexander gave up everything, left his job, abandoned his meetings and important calls, just to go find his daughter. He didn't know what he could say to convince her, but he knew that if he did nothing, he would lose her forever. When he found Emily, it wasn't a simple reunion. What he saw was a girl standing at a crossroads in life, full of fear and confusion. And so, in a moment neither of them would ever forget, Alexander knelt before Emily, not out of power, but out of love. "Give me a chance," he said, his voice trembling, filled with pain. "Let me start over, and give me the chance to make it up to you." Those words from Alexander squeezed Emily's heart. She wanted to believe, truly wanted to believe, that everything he said was real. But the pain inside her was too deep. She had lived a life without parents, without a family. She had faced every hardship on her own, learned how to stand on her own 2 feet. And now, standing in front of this man, she didn't know if she could trust his apology. How could she believe that his words weren't just empty, just a comfort he was offering himself? Her tears began to fall, not because she wanted to cry, but because the pain she had buried for so long was finally rising to the surface. "Why didn't you find me sooner?" she choked out. "Why didn't you come for me when I needed you the most? I've lived my whole life without a family. How can I believe you truly want me to be your daughter?" Unanswered questions, haunting doubts, they slowly stole the peace from her heart. Looking into Emily's tear-filled eyes, Alexander felt his heart shatter. He knew no words could heal the wounds inside her. But he couldn't let her keep living in this pain. He had to be honest with her. He had to admit all the mistakes he had made. "I was wrong," he sighed, his voice rough. "I let the years slip by without searching for you, without taking care of you. I've lived a lonely life, full of regret. And I can't change the past. But I can change the present." Alexander looked into Emily's eyes, his own filled with sincerity and sorrow. "From now on, you will be my #1 priority. I will never let you feel alone again. I will do everything to make it up to you. Please, give me the chance to truly be your father." Every word he spoke felt like a promise, a heartfelt apology from the depths of his soul, and in that moment, in the golden light of sunset, as the last rays of the day stretched across the land, father and daughter were no longer strangers. Emotion swelled, too deep to put into words. They stood there, in the wide-open space, with nothing but the truth and sincere love between them. Emily embraced Alexander, and he held her tightly, as if he never wanted to let go. Finally, they no longer felt divided by the past, by pain, or by doubts. They had accepted each other, with all they had. Emily no longer felt lost, and Alexander no longer felt guilty. They had found each other, and in that moment, nothing could break their connection. For the first time in their lives, they truly felt like a family. On the first day Emily stepped into Alexander's vast mansion, she felt a strange sense of unfamiliarity. The entire house radiated luxury, and everything around her was completely different from what she had known. She had grown up in a small town, in her grandmother's modest house, where everything was simple. Now, she stood in a foreign world she had never even imagined. However, what surprised her was that there was no coldness or distance as she had expected. Alexander, the father she had just met, had opened both his heart and his home to her with genuine sincerity, and so, a new life began. She returned to school, attending classes for the first time like a normal student, no longer burdened by the pressures of being an heiress. Each passing day, she felt a strange peace settle in her heart. She no longer had to worry about questions, expectations, or the judgmental eyes of others. All she needed to do was study, grow, and live the life she had always dreamed of. She began to experience protection and love, something she had never truly felt in her 22 years. Gradually, this new world was no longer foreign, it became her real home. In those first months together, Alexander constantly showed care and love for Emily. He was not just a father in name, but also a friend, a teacher who helped her discover new joys in life. They spent time together not in business meetings or grand deals, but in simple yet meaningful moments. They cooked together, sharing warm meals where there was no pressure or outside expectations. Though Emily was still clumsy, every time she helped Alexander prepare a meal, they shared wonderful time together, in the afternoons. They tended to the plants in the garden, each tree a testament to the love and care Alexander gave to the most important things in life. Then there were the short trips, not too far away, glamorous places, but simple journeys where they watched sunsets together, talked, and enjoyed peaceful moments. Though their lives had changed, through these small acts, they learned to cherish the simplest things. And day by day, Emily realized that you don't need to have everything to feel joy, it's the little things, the complete moments, that are the true keys to happiness. As she gradually adjusted to her new life, Emily began to find her own voice. She didn't want to just be an heiress living a life of luxury. She wanted to be someone with ideals, someone who could make a difference. She remembered the days back in the small town, where she had witnessed the struggles many young people faced. She knew she could do something, not just to help herself, but to help less fortunate youths, those who weren't born into wealthy families. Emily decided to become an ambassador for charities that help children and the poor. She didn't just appear at events, she directly participated in fundraising, organized programs to help children, provided scholarships, and supported kids in difficult circumstances. She began to realize that her wealth wasn't meant for indulgence, but for sharing and bringing good to those around her. She found true joy and purpose when she could change someone's life, Even if it was just one person, Emily didn't want to be simply the heiress of a wealthy empire. She didn't want her life to revolve solely around money and fame. She wanted to create real change, to do something meaningful for society and for those in need. Her work with charitable organizations didn't just bring her satisfaction. It helped her realize the power of making a difference. She wanted to use her influence to help those without opportunities, to inspire those searching for hope. With belief in her ideals, Emily began to join larger community projects. She started learning from those who came before her, from social leaders, to build a long-term strategy to help the poor and disadvantaged children. She was determined not just to leave a name in family history, but to become someone of real value in the community. Each day, she drew closer to her goal, and the dreams she once had of a better life were now becoming reality, not just for herself, but for others as well. Looking at his daughter, Alexander felt boundless pride. Throughout his life, he had everything one could wish for: money, power, fame. But nothing could compare to the happiness and fulfillment he felt watching Emily grow up, become strong, and do meaningful things. She was not just the daughter he had always longed for, but a tremendous source of motivation in his life. She had saved his life, bringing him things money could never buy: love, connection, and faith in change. Alexander knew that even if he owned all the wealth in the world, family love, and moments spent with loved ones were the most precious things. He looked at Emily, his eyes filled with pride and love. "You've changed my life," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "You've brought me something money could never buy. You are the greatest gift I have." In the end, Emily and Alexander were not just father and daughter. They became close friends, allies who faced every challenge together. There was no longer a gap between a wealthy father and a long-lost daughter. They had truly become a team. Together, they built large projects. Together they created positive changes in society. They were not just family, but warriors, companions walking side by side to make the world a better place. Though the road ahead was still filled with challenges, they were ready to face anything. They understood that as long as they stood together, nothing was impossible. They had found an eternal bond, and together, they continued their journey, with faith in the future and the beautiful things yet to come. A year had passed since Emily and Alexander began rebuilding their new life, and now, Emily stood before a crowd at a charity fundraiser. She stood on stage, her face radiant and full of confidence, no longer the awkward, lost girl she once was. She had transformed, grown, and become the person she had always dreamed of being, someone who could inspire others. Especially those who felt unloved, unaccepted. Emily began her speech with a warm yet powerful voice. "There was a time when I believed I didn't deserve love," she said. "I lived a life full of uncertainty, without a real family. But then, life gave me a chance to reclaim what I had lost. And I want you to understand, you are worthy of love. It is never too late to start again. No one is undeserving of having a family, a place to belong." Emily's words brought many in the room to tears. She wasn't just sharing her story, she was offering a profound message about self-worth, about always believing that you deserve happiness and love, no matter what your past holds. And as she spoke the final words, "Believe that you are worthy of love," her eyes sparkled with hope and conviction. That was the message Emily wanted to leave behind, that everyone has the right to be loved, to be valued, and it is never too late to find yourself again. In the dimly lit audience, sitting quietly in the front row, Alexander's eyes were filled with tears. He watched his daughter, the girl he once thought he had lost forever, now standing proudly on stage, sharing her life story with the world. The tears falling down his cheeks were not from pain or regret, but from overwhelming pride. He had once believed everything was lost, that there would never be a chance to mend the mistakes of the past. But now, looking at Emily, he saw so clearly, she had not only forgiven him, but had become a strong, inspiring woman, helping others overcome their struggles. Alexander's tears were not of sorrow but of deep happiness. He remembered the lonely years, the sleepless nights worrying about his daughter, and he realized that all he had ever needed was one chance to prove his love. And now, his daughter had not only forgiven him, but had become a beacon of hope. A symbol of second chances for anyone searching for one. Alexander needed no words, he simply sat there, watching his daughter, overflowing with boundless pride. As Emily looked directly into the camera, she wasn't just speaking to the crowd in the room, she was speaking to everyone out there who felt lost, aimless, without a place to belong. She knew there were so many people struggling with loneliness, searching for a family, for a place where they could feel safe and loved. But Emily wanted them to understand that family isn't just about blood. Family is the people who love you unconditionally, the ones who stay and help you up when you fall. Family isn't always the people you're born with, she said, her voice strong and clear. Family is the people who stand by you when you need them most, the people who never abandon you, no matter what. Remember, you are not alone, there will always be someone out there ready to give you the love you deserve. Emily's words washed over the room like a powerful wave, piercing into the hearts of everyone listening. She wanted to remind them that no matter how hard life gets, you are never without a true family, because family is made up of the people you choose to love and who love you in return. After Emily's inspiring words, the video cut to a tender moment between father and daughter. The scene was gentle, peaceful, Alexander and Emily walking hand in hand through a park. They didn't need to say anything, they simply enjoyed the moment, a moment they had waited so long for. Both were smiling brightly, as if the years of separation, the pain, the mistakes no longer mattered. They were living in the present, and all they needed was each other. This scene needed no dialogue, only the closeness and warm affection between father and daughter. Fluffy clouds drifted across the sky, golden sunlight streamed through the trees, creating the perfect setting for the two to fully embrace what they now had. This was the symbol of a true family, not one that needed to be perfect, but one built on love and mutual acceptance. Right after this scene, a short but powerful message appeared on the screen: no one is forgotten. No one is undeserving of a second chance. This was the message that both Emily and Alexander wanted to share with the world. They had given each other a second chance, and from that, they had not only rediscovered their family but also reclaimed their own identities. They wanted everyone watching the video to understand that no matter your mistakes, no matter how lost you feel, there is always a chance to begin again, to change your life.